which turned out to be bacteriostatic water, monotherapy. I mean, I still can't believe it. You know how dumb I feel? I feel so stupid for this to happen, dude. Vigorous Steve here with my latest blood work results. They're about 2 weeks old, because when I got these results back and I saw that I was clinically androgen deficient, I realized that the pharmaceutical Merck Sharp & Dohme Pregnal HCG that I was running was fake, or bunk, or underdosed, or denatured during transport. I'm not really sure entirely, but as of my latest blood work results 2 weeks ago, my beta HCG levels were undetectable, and my total testosterone was only 120 nanograms per deciliter. Estradiol was 11.3 picograms per milliliter, so that's at the bottom of the reference range, but total testosterone is about halfway below the reference range. And weirdly enough, I still felt fine. I still felt strong. I was still kicking ass in the gym, albeit not with as much intensity or as many reps as before. So when I got these results back, I couldn't believe it initially, because I still felt fine. I still felt good. I still felt strong, and my libido was actually quite okay. But I think after I saw these results, then you start to think in the back of your head, like, is my libido really that good? Am I really that strong? And after that, I think it's placebo, but my strength has gone down. My libido has gone down. My sense of well-being is still pretty much the same, but I'm starting to feel off. And I honestly think it's just these blood work results that are messing with my mind, because going into the hospital, I figured, you know what? I'm using pharmaceutical MSD Pregnal. It's legit. My previous blood work results showed that the HCG was working. My estradiol was a little bit disproportionately high for the amount of testosterone that I was taking. My DHA sulfate levels were somewhere towards the middle top of the reference range, which is also an effect of HCG. I checked my beta HCG levels a couple months ago, where they were significantly elevated after a 250 IU MSD Pregnal administration. But I just come to the conclusion that now my HCG monotherapy experiment is kind of in the trash. And now I'm not exactly sure when I made the switch from MSD Pregnal, which was legitimate, keeping my testicles nice and functional and voluminous and fertile, as proven by the latest semen analysis and fertility check, which I did about 2 months ago at the end of my previous cycle, to MSD Pregnal, which is underdosed or denatured, as proven by a fertility test. Now, I've tested a lot of MSD Pregnal vials in my fridge. Actually, I tested all of them. I was just going through all of the batches until I would magically and hopefully find a vial that was still showing up as a positive test. But unfortunately for me, all of them turned out to be negative. So what I would do is put 500 IUs on the testing strip, wait for this to clear. I had one where the test showed up a little bit, and the control would turn out to be this color, so you can see that here. Hopefully it will focus, and otherwise I'll overlay a picture. So one of them actually showed a little bit on the testing strip. I administered the remaining of the vial, so that's 4,500 IU, which I administered subcutaneously. Then over several days I would pee on the testing strip. All of them turned out to be negative. So I went on a sourcing spree. I looked at all the underground labs HCG which are available in Thailand, contacting a multitude of pharmacies. Did the same thing, 500 IU on the testing strip, administered 4,500 IUs in an attempt to circumvent maybe a false negative. Right? Maybe there's some binders or other chemicals in the HCG which prevent it from showing up as a positive test. But all of them turned out to be negative. So all of the HCG that I have access to here in Thailand, besides one pharmaceutical brand, which I'm still trying to sort, being LG Chemicals. And yes, that's the same South Korean LG that produces electronics and televisions. They also make HCG and growth hormone. Their growth hormone is very good, by the way. So that's the last pharmaceutical HCG that I might have access to. But as of now, all of my sources say that they can't get it. Keep in mind that the Merck Sharp & Dohme Pregnal I was able to source through a hospital, albeit not on prescription, so I guess joke's on me. I figured out, after digging into the FDA database here in Thailand, which is public, I'll list it down below, that MSD Pregnal is not FDA approved. Their database is a little bit wishy-washy, so maybe I can't find the entry. I was able to find Organon Pregnal, BBT Biotech from Germany, Hokok, which is HCG found in several different dosages, and this LG Chemicals IVF-C, being 5,000 IUs. That's my last option. All of the underground labs are fake or underdosed or bunk. Same as the MSD Pregnil, which I had access to. I asked my source about it. They didn't really know what to say. I figured it's a transportation issue. Now, I feel kind of stupid because I have this beautiful source list where a ton of pharmaceutical HCG is available from India or Russia or a couple other places. But transportation into Thailand right now will take about 2 to 4 weeks. It's incredibly hot, and most likely when that HCG arrives here, due to the temperature fluctuations, going into the airplane, being cold, maybe freezing in the cargo hold, and then arriving here in the super hot climate, and sitting at the post office for a couple days before it's actually delivered, and can find its way into my fridge, where the temperature is very, very stable. It's probably denatured by that time as well. So yeah, I don't really know what to say besides my utmost sincere apologies. I'm going to take that video, can you freeze your HCG or not, offline, because I can't verify if the HCG that I used for that experiment, the MSD Pregnil, which I froze repeatedly, was even legitimate or not. So that video I'm taking offline. I will do a retest of that video, can you freeze your HCG or not, when I have access to pharmaceutical HCG, which I can run through a pregnancy test and verify that it's actually legitimate with a pregnancy test and blood work before I run that experiment again. But as of now, I don't have access to HCG. I will update you guys on Instagram if I do have access to LG chemicals or when the temperature comes down. But right now, basically clinically androgen deficient. Now, I was able to run an experiment with decapeptyl, being 100 micrograms triptorelin, which was able to raise my total testosterone levels, LH and FSH levels, only marginally. So let's dive into the blood work results. We'll handle my hormone panel first. As a quick reminder, at the end of my cycle on February 13th, my estradiol was 33.8 picograms per milliliter, total testosterone about 1200 nanograms per deciliter, free testosterone around 44 nanograms per deciliter, bioavailable testosterone 1035 nanograms per deciliter. My SHBG was a very low 8.4 nanomoles per liter, and my DHA sulfate was 325 micrograms per deciliter, somewhere in the middle of the reference range. Now this shows, based on the DHA sulfate levels and the disproportionately high estradiol for the amount of testosterone I was taking, with the ratio of testosterone to primobolan being 235 milligrams testosterone enanthate and 375 milligrams primobolan plus 5 milligrams anavar per day. But I felt that this estradiol level was disproportionately high, and my DHA sulfate levels were nicely in the middle of the reference range. And based on these results, I would actually recommend myself to add 25 milligrams supplemental DHEA in to raise my DHA sulfate and free DHA levels slightly to keep these neurosteroid concentrations more proportionate to the elevated testosterone concentrations and the elevated estradiol concentrations, so they're all towards the top of the reference range. So based on these results, I would say that the MSD Pregnil I was running at the time was legitimate. But fast forward 6 weeks later to March 25th, when I was 6 weeks off cycle, my beta HCG at that time was undetectable, below 1.2 milli-IUs per milliliter. So that already shows that the HCG that I administered the day before was not containing any HCG. So that was just 0.05 milliliters bacteriostatic water. My FSH and LH already came up from baseline, which is normal on cycle, where it's basically 0.01 or 0.02 milli-IUs per milliliter. In this case, it was 0.04 milli-IUs per milliliter, which is already creeping up to the reference range, albeit not sufficient to produce any significant amount of testosterone. Estradiol was 11.3 picograms per milliliter. Total testosterone 120.31 nanograms per deciliter, and it's half below the reference range. Free testosterone 1.64 nanograms per deciliter, bioavailable 41 nanograms per deciliter. The only good thing is that my SHBG came back up to 51.1 nanomoles per liter, so this little amount of total testosterone I have all bound up in SHBG. Libido was still surprisingly okay, right? Not phenomenal, but not terrible either. My DHA sulfate came down from 325 to 127 micrograms per deciliter. So all in all, my levels were sliced with about 60 to 95%. It is a tremendous amount of reduction over these 6 weeks, albeit that I didn't really notice a difference, to be honest. Now, luckily for me, I still had one single dose of Ferritin Pharmaceuticals Decapeptyl in the fridge, which contains 100 micrograms Triptorelin acetate in a pre-constituted glass syringe. This has been stored properly. I got this cold shipped to me a couple months ago. This was my last option to restore some sort of testicular function. So I administered 100 micrograms Triptorelin acetate subcutaneously about 12 hours before doing another test on April the 3rd. I'll link a study down below which shows the effects of 100 micrograms Triptorelin acetate on the HPGA or HPOA, where you see that the LH and FSH concentrations really go out of the reference range. Of course, my HPTA was shut down for months again. I was sustaining testicular function with HCG up until a certain point, so I didn't expect too much of this. And these studies showed that the peak concentration of LH and FSH is reached within approximately 2 hours, after which it starts to decline. So you can have a look at that study to see how much those serum concentrations change and taper off. For me, 12 hours after this 100 microgram Triptorelin administration, beta HCG was still undetectable. So that means that all of the HCG that I administered before that time was underdosed or bunk or non-existent. My FSH levels came up from 0.05 to 3.71 milli-IUs per milliliter. My LH came up from 0.04 to 4.59 milli-IUs per milliliter. So that shows that my Triptorelin was legitimate. Estradiol came up slightly, about 40%, from 11.3 to 15.7 picograms per milliliter. Total testosterone came up with 71%, from 120 to 105.73 nanograms per deciliter. Free testosterone came up slightly to about 3 nanograms per deciliter. I didn't recheck bioavailable testosterone because you need to check your albumin levels for that. And, well, who cares? I just care about the total testosterone levels at this point. SHBG came up slightly. That's why my free testosterone levels didn't go up so much. So from 51 to 53 nanomoles per liter. And my DHA sulfate came up slightly from 127 to 183 micrograms per deciliter. So that shows that the Triptorelin was legit. I didn't recheck my hormone levels since then, so now we're about a week ahead. I didn't really feel a difference between the results on March 25th and April 3rd. So I can't really say if this Triptorelin administration somehow restored my HPTA, which is not what I set myself out for, but apparently this was a way to raise my total testosterone levels somewhat. I don't have access to HCG, so this HCG monotherapy experiment is off the menu. So I have a couple options ahead. I leave things as is, and fingers crossed that this Triptorelin is able to sustain my HPTA going forward for the next 2 months that I expect to be off cycle, after which I will reintroduce testosterone and primo again, right? Because I would like to add in a little bit of the good stuff and continue with my bodybuilding journey, albeit at moderate dosages. I can go on selective estrogen receptor modulators. I do have access to raloxifene, tamoxifen, clomiphene. I don't have access to enclomiphene, but I could source it. It would still take about 2 to 4 weeks before it arrives. So then I have 4 weeks left, and I'm already at the tail end of what I would do for a post-cycle therapy with selective estrogen receptor modulators. I don't really want to run those, not for the IGF-1 reduction, but for the clotting risks. With nowadays, in the global situation that we're in, I don't want to undergo any unnecessary clotting risks. So that option is off the table. I'm not going to do the middle finger, so let's just start at the start again. I have access to Gorilla Mind Sigma, which will take about 10 days to arrive. Again, I didn't expect to run this product of them being a testosterone booster because I assumed that my MSD Pregnal was legitimate. And why run a testosterone boosting over-the-counter supplement when you have access to pharmaceutical HCG, which will turn out to be bunk. So now I might reconsider this offer and go on Gorilla Mind Sigma to boost my testosterone levels with the Tonkat Ali and the Fedosia agrestis and the ashwagandha root extract that it contains, right? All of the compounds that are known to increase testosterone levels are contained within this testosterone boosting product that is just released on the market, I believe, yesterday. I could try that, or I could go back on TRT, legitimate TRT that is, half an ampule of Bayer testovirin per week. Keep in mind that these Bayer testovirin ampules are generally overfilled, so I could draw 1.25 milliliters in general, so that's 325 milligrams testosterone enanthate that I could get from every single ampule. Take half of an ampule per week would be about 156 milligrams test E per week, enough to be considered TRT, but not enough to be considered a cycle or a TRT dose for bodybuilders. Again, I'm trying to keep it moderate. My idea was to get somewhat natural and within the reference range total testosterone levels for the time that I'm not focusing on bodybuilding 100% and trying to avoid the heat that is now present in Thailand. Now with this total testosterone of 120 to 208 nanograms per deciliter, the heat is very tolerable. So I'm happy about that. But I am getting fatter, right? I increased my calories, obviously, because I wanted to sustain my strength somewhat. I do have to mention that I'm still running 5 milligrams Nebivolol, which is a beta blocker, and they are known to reduce total testosterone concentrations and negatively affect your hormone profile. Again, I didn't expect this to happen because I was assuming that my MSD Pregnil was legitimate. I'm not going to take the 5 milligrams Nebivolol out because I do like the feeling and the benefits of having a lower heart rate. I stopped the telmisartan, I stopped the ezetimibe, I stopped the thyroxine T4, I stopped the empagliflozin. So the only thing I was running the last couple of weeks basically was the Nebivolol. I didn't do the icing the testicles protocol because, again, I wanted to see where my testosterone levels would end up on HCG monotherapy, which turned out to be bacteriostatic water monotherapy. I mean, I still can't believe it. You know how dumb I feel? I feel so fucking stupid for this to happen, dude. Anyway, so the only ancillary I was running was 5 milligrams Nebivolol. Maybe that's why my total testosterone levels were so disgustingly low the last couple of weeks. I'm assuming that I didn't feel this bad because of the 250 milligrams NAD plus that I was doing weekly, which I now moved to a monthly approach because there's a loading protocol involved of NAD plus. So the IV treatment that I've been doing weekly for the last couple of weeks up until last week were 1800 milligrams injectable glutathione, about 5000 milligrams vitamin C, a B complex, B100 complex, and 250 milligrams NAD plus, all diluted in 500 milligrams normal saline solution and administered over about 45 minutes to 1 hour intravenously. Is that the reason why I didn't feel off? Is that the reason why I was still strong? I'm sure the caloric increase played into that as well. And the added rest days, not taking any sets to failure besides my calf workouts. So I would leave 2 to 4 reps in reserves. And the only body part I would took to failure was calves, 4 sets per week. And all the other body parts I was kind of neglecting. I'm getting a little bit fatter. I'm getting a little bit fluffy. All in all, my mood, energy, and all of that stuff is actually quite good, I would say, all things considering. So you guys can let me know down below in the comment section what you would like to see for the next 2 months. You can choose my destiny, as they would say in Mortal Kombat. We can leave things as is. Fingers crossed my HPTA picks up and my levels come back somewhat. I can start icing my testicles and reintroduce all of the over-the-counter supplements which are known to work. I don't want to do SERMs. I'm not really interested in running compounds which induce clotting risks, right, and complicate the matter further. I can run Gorilla Mind Sigma, which will take about 2 weeks to get in. We can see how much of a positive effect that has on my testosterone production. Or I can go on TRT, being legitimate TRT around 150 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. Let me know what you would like to see from yours truly. Again, my sincere apologies that this HCG monotherapy experiment failed. I know a lot of you guys were looking forward to the results regarding how much muscle I was able to sustain, how my fertility would improve from this 60 million sperm per milliliter and decent morphology, decent motility to 3.5 months later on this HCG monotherapy experiment without exogenous testosterone in the picture. Which again, failed as of now, right? There's a dip of at least 6 weeks where I was not running any HCG and, well, who knows where my fertility is at now, right? We have a 3-month delay on fertility because it takes about 78 days for spermatogenesis to occur and then 11 days for the sperm to travel to the prostate where it's ready for ejaculation. So that is off the table as of now. And again, guys, if I'm somehow magically able to source LG Chemicals IVFC 5000 IU's HCG vials that are legitimate and stored properly and transported properly, they will test positive on a pregnancy test. Then we'll go back to 250 IU's HCG, continue with the HCG monotherapy for the next 2 months or however long I'm able to run that after I'm able to source this LG Chemicals HCG. Fingers crossed, I do a little prayer for me that I'm able to find this. And otherwise, I'll leave it up to you guys what you would like to see for me the next 2 months or so. Now, as for my other blood work results, it's kind of uneventful, not very interesting, so I'll keep it brief. Right, I've discussed all of these markers so many times on this YouTube channel. I'm sure you guys are already bored of it. So we'll touch on it briefly. Bear with me. In the urinalysis, my specific gravity was 1.004, indicating good hydration. I drank about 2 liters of water before doing blood work, so we know that the hematocrit and the kidney markers were taken in a sufficiently hydrated state. That being said, hematocrit is still 53%, down slightly from 54 to 53%. That's probably because red blood cell active life is about 100 to 120 days. It's only been 6 weeks since I came off primobolan. And keep in mind that primobolan takes a couple weeks to metabolize, so you still get some erythropoietic activity and increased red blood cell production. Still, it came down slightly, but I expect hematocrit and red blood cell count to come down more over the next couple of months as these old red blood cells are being destroyed and recycled. Of the blood chemistry, there's not so much of note. My glucose is pretty much the same. My blood urea nitrogen went down slightly because I reduced my protein intake and increased my fat and carbohydrate intake. My creatinine went down slightly with about 10% from 1.24 to 1.12 milligrams per deciliter, probably because I'm not training so much, and reduced my creatine intake because I'm only taking pre-workout twice per week, not 5 times per week now. Cystatin C went up, surprisingly, with 28% approximately from 0.65 to 0.83 milligrams per liter. Most likely that's because I reduced my astragalus root extract to, I think, 1,500 milligrams per day. So before I would take maybe 4 grams of astragalus root extract, and now I'm only taking 2 capsules of Gorilla Mind astragalus root extract, being 1,500 milligrams per day. So maybe that's the reason why my cystatin C levels went up. Right? I feel that astragalus root extract is highly beneficial to keep your cystatin C levels towards the bottom of the reference range, what I see with myself and most of my clients. I don't really see an effect on serum creatinine levels, especially when I take creatine in the form of supplements. Uric acid came down slightly. I guess that's a moment in time. Creatine phosphokinase came down from about 2,200 to about 1,400 units per liter. Again, I reduced my training intensity, so I expect these levels to come down even more over the next couple of weeks. C-reactive protein, pretty much the same, 0.5 milligrams per liter. Cholesterol levels went down noticeably. Again, I discontinued the ezetimibe. Total cholesterol levels stayed pretty much the same, around 130 milligrams per deciliter, but the difference between HDL and LDL improved quite a bit. Last time my HDL was 25, and now it's 53 milligrams per deciliter. Still not optimal, could be better. But again, HCG was fake, and HCG usually improves your HDL and LDL levels. I did add a little bit more eggs to my diet, so maybe that's one of the reasons. LDL came down from 96 to 73, so that's a reduction with 25%. I discontinued the ezetimibe, but reducing or removing the anavar and the primobolan improved my lipid levels. Still doing my daily fasted cardio, taking the citrus bergamot and the fish oil, and all the good healthy dieting that you're supposed to do when you're in this bodybuilding or fitness space. And so my lipid levels look quite good. Triglycerides are nice and low, staying on top of my carnitine injections. Liver is pretty much the same. My liver enzymes came down slightly. My ALT is still out of range at 52 units per liter, but my AST is within range, 39 units per liter. Nothing really noticeable to report. I did do a fibroscan with a good result, but I'll save that for another video. My iron level came up slightly from 78 to 139 micrograms per deciliter, and my ferritin also from 172 to 185 nanograms per milliliter. These two markers might actually increase further over the next 2 months as the old red blood cells are being destroyed through autophagy or apoptosis, the red blood cells which were produced on cycle when primobolan was in the picture, they released our hemoglobin, which is metabolized into bilirubin, and then the iron contained within is recycled, raising serum iron concentrations, and then later being stored in the ferritin molecules. Right, so these two might increase over the next 2 months. It's very normal. They will decrease after I reintroduce the testosterone in the primobolan, and this erythropoietic activity and red blood cell production will increase, taking the iron from the blood and the ferritin and storing that in hemoglobin contained within the red blood cells. Hemoglobin A1C still around 5%. Average estimated glucose went up from 90 to 97, so that's a slight increase, probably because I increased my carbohydrate intake. I'm keeping track of my hemoglobin A1C fasted insulin levels and the average glucose levels because now I'm running this MOTS-C, but this MOTS-C experiment will last for about 3 months because, again, hemoglobin A1C is an average of about 3 months. So don't worry, guys, I will release dedicated videos about these compounds as soon as I'm done trialing them. So stay tuned for that. Now is a good time to subscribe if you're not subscribed already so you can get those videos as soon as they drop. Leave me a like if you like this video. Let me know down below in the comment section what you would like to see from me for the next 2 months or so. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the description section. Quick announcement, I just signed with Marek Health. So if you're looking for a very comprehensive, very extensive health panel, the Vigorous panel, look no further than Marek Health. Again, it's limited to people who live in the United States. They might open up and expand to Canada in the near future. But for now, Marek Health is for US residents only. You can find my Vigorous panel on their website. You can get 10% off your first lab panel with Marek Health using Vigorous as a discount code. But if this Vigorous panel is too extensive for you or too expensive, you don't need all of these markers, you can actually comprise your own lab panel using the marker selection tool that Marek Health has. So what I'll do early next week after I'm done discussing the FibroScan and the EKG results and do another podcast, which I'll release over the weekend. Once all of that is behind me, I'll discuss the blood work markers which you can get at Marek Health, why they're beneficial, in which cases you should do certain markers and in which cases they're not really needed, how you can do several add-ons like cancer marker screening or heavy metal screening which could go on top of this Vigorous panel, or how you can comprise your own panel and still get 10% off using the Vigorous discount code. I'll leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos dropping soon. See you in the next one. Oh, and before I forget, a front double bicep for the Vigorous crew. Androgen deficient, but I can't really tell. Still decent cannons and somewhat still in shape, but don't ask me to take off my shirt because my abs are non-existent. See you guys in the next one.